Jesus made an important statement about the word place. He said, "I go to prepare a place for you. Let me take you to the place where it all began."
The story of our American Thanksgiving really begins here in Plymouth, Massachusetts, with the people who called themselves Pilgrims, and we've called them that ever since. They came here to Plymouth on board the Mayflower, the replica of which is behind me here in Plymouth Harbor.
In England, people began to encounter Jesus Christ in a personal way. So enthusiastic and joyful were they that the church disapproved. The people separated themselves from the church so they could continue to worship as they felt God was leading them. The church began to persecute them, hound them, and even put them in jail.
Hide the scriptures, the magistrate is here.
They'd been terribly persecuted in England because they were evangelical Christians.
Pastor, the congregation needs your direction.
If we don't leave now, we're going to lose all of our children.
Well, then this is our calling. We need to leave now.
The crossing was rough. They tried to come on two ships, the Mayflower and the Speedwell, but the Speedwell kept leaking and they finally had to abandon her. That's why they were delayed, put out into the North Atlantic in the fall storm season. Children crying, people being sick. That God had his hand on them.
A pilgrim is on a journey set by God with a purpose and a destination.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Sometimes God puts others on the path, knowing they will share their food and their lives.
Peter, what's the real history of Thanksgiving?
Well, here in New England, when the Pilgrims came ashore in December of 1620 down at Plymouth Harbor here, they found the ground cleared, 4 freshwater springs, and no Indians around to buy the land from. Well, they had to start from scratch to build their shelter, to build their houses. And they're in a howling New England wilderness. By this time, the snow is flying. The men catch cold. Almost every single family lost at least one person. All the food they've brought on the Mayflower is now gone. They're in desperate straits indeed.
So what divine providence was provided for their rescue?
An Indian by the name of Squanto, God's miraculous provision, literally for their salvation. You got to go back to the year 1602. Kidnap, literally. He learned to speak English fluently. He learned to eat English foods and learned English customs and ways. Now, here is what God did. At the moment that Squanto is standing on the auction block being sold as a slave, a monk from a nearby monastery just happens to walk by and takes pity on him, buys him, takes him to the monastery. And Squanto lives with these monks. He learns all about the Christian God, the Christian faith. After about a year, negotiates passage back across the Atlantic. He comes back in 1619, 1 year before the Pilgrims will arrive. But when he got back here, he received the shock of his life. Plague had come and killed all of the Pawtuxets. As far as he knew, he was the last living Pawtuxet.
Sometimes we do not understand the suffering in our destiny, but in this case, God seems to have had a plan. The Englishmen could not have survived without Squanto.
Most importantly, he taught them how to plant corn, which was what the Indians lived on in the winter, right? In October, when the corn was ripe, they wanted to hold a Thanksgiving celebration. As some people say, it was Squanto's idea, actually. There was a 3-day celebration. When you look in the Bible, the story of Joseph in the Old Testament, how God's man was prepared through suffering and slavery to keep his people alive in the time of their greatest need when they were in famine. Same thing here at Plymouth, Shelli. This is God's Joseph story for America.
It's so good to be here with you again, Laughing Song in Atlanta, in the oldest Native American Baptist church in America. The Pilgrims came here. They believed that God had prepared a table for them in the wilderness. John 14:2 is the scripture that comes to mind. I am going there to prepare a place for you. That's what the Pilgrims believed. You became the host people for those Pilgrims. How did God prepare your people for that?
Legends tell of our chieftain, Hardship, of how in a dream, before he actually departed from us, told us that visitors would be coming. They would be strangers to you, but as we have always been, we were always helpful, and we would share with them our knowledge of our ways and to help them.
The Pilgrims and the natives became one and together achieved more than they could have ever dreamed.
What should we have learned from the Pilgrims about being grateful and Thanksgiving?
All Americans today ought to be grateful to these Pilgrims for literally founding the nation.
Mayflower sailed west out of this harbor over the horizon. You know that they were tempted to sink in their hearts the rest of the way on this boat.
So would you say that America has a calling, a destiny to fulfill?
Oh, absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed our program. If you'd like more information about our nation, visit this website at www.glorytrain.com.